Senator Gianaris.
Mr. President, I believe you have an amendment at the desk. I ask that the reading of the amendment be waived and that we may be heard on the amendment.
Senator Gianaris, I've reviewed your amendment and the rule, and it is not to remain at this time to the bill and is therefore out of order.
Mr. President, the bill also relates to hunting, which obviously involves firearms, but I would like to appeal your decision in any event, and I would ask that Senator Kavanaugh be heard, and then there will be a handful of members after Senator Kavanaugh that would also like to be heard on the appeal.
Senator Kavanaugh.
Mr. President, the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School has once again brought our nation's gun violence epidemic into full view. And even though New York has the third lowest rate of gun-related death in the United States, and even though we have strong laws and we have effective policing and we have community-based programs intended to prevent gun violence, we are not immune. Each year, Mr. President, roughly 900 New Yorkers are killed by guns. Mr. President, that is 900 too many. And today we're talking about several important steps we can take to bring that number down. 5 years ago, in the wake of another school shooting, and in the wake of a violent incident in Webster, New York, in which our first responders were specifically targeted, members of this House and the other House of the legislature and the governor came together to pass the SAFE Act. It was not a perfect bill, but it has served us well. And the sky did not fall, Mr. President. The police did not go door to door taking hunters' guns. The right of New Yorkers to have guns to defend their homes was not infringed. New Yorkers' rights were protected, and so were their lives. Today, we have the opportunity to do that again, to come together for the greater good and pass a common-sense law that will save lives. The law I'm talking about, Mr. President, creates extreme risk protection orders and empowers family members and police to stop gun violence. The sad truth is that people close to those who commit gun violence often see warning signs before the tragedy occurs, and they are powerless to intervene. The teenager who's been arrested for the shooting in Parkland, Florida, had left threatening social media posts. He'd had dozens of contacts with law enforcement, and he had a history of violence. People reached out to the authorities several times, but they did nothing. If legislation like the bill we're proposing today had been in place, people would have been able to present evidence to a judge, prove that this individual was likely to harm others, and take real action to prevent this tragedy by restricting his access to guns.
Senator Hoylman to be heard on the appeal.
But Parkland is just the latest mass shooting. There have been 30 since 2018, and with each mass shooting, we tend to become numb to the horrors of the previous one, including the mass shooting in Las Vegas last year, where 58 people and 851 individuals were wounded, the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. Well, in that massacre, the shooter used a device called a bump stock. These devices are illegal to use in New York State, but because of a loophole in our state law, they're legal to own, they're legal to sell, they're legal to buy on the internet, they're legal to transport in the back of your car. The loophole doesn't make any sense. There'd be no reason to own a bump stock if not to use it.
Senator Prasad to be heard on the appeal.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment would create a New York State Firearm Violence Research Institute that would operate under the auspices of SUNY, where they would study this epidemic. Firearm violence in our community is a health care epidemic. The research would provide invaluable resources to the governor, our legislature, and any agency that needs information on how to formulate nuanced responses to this epidemic. Gun violence in the United States is a public health problem. Unfortunately, the federal government prohibits the Center for Disease Control from treating this as such. We must look at gun violence in our communities as a health epidemic. We must fund a research institute so that we can eliminate this issue of gun violence in our communities. Again, thank you all for your support.
Senator Gianaris to be heard on the appeal.
Thank you, Mr. President. You heard from my colleagues that these are some very reasonable common sense proposals that I would be hard pressed to find an argument against. But I want to talk about the broader approach to this important issue for a second, because we also hear a lot about safety at locations, hardening locations, and there's certainly room for dialogue on that issue, and I'm sure we will have it. But we have to cross a line in our thinking, not only in the state but in the country, which is that guns make more killings more likely even if the person is dangerous himself or herself. Okay? It is the weapon itself that allows even more people to be killed. So yes, people kill people, but guns do kill people too, and guns kill more people than a person with a fist or a person with a knife. And if we don't reach that conclusion, we're just going to be lamenting more and more deaths. Deaths of children, deaths of churchgoers, deaths of moviegoers. And are we going to just chase the location of choice of the latest massacre? So now we're going to harden schools, which maybe we should do, and we should certainly have that conversation. Are we going to harden our movie theaters because there was a mass shooting at a movie theater a while ago? Are we going to harden our churches because there was a mass killing at a church in South Carolina? Are we just going to have armed guards everywhere in the state, at every location, trying to predict where the next mass shooting is going to be? How about we take the shooting out of the mass shooting and take guns away from people who shouldn't have them? I have a proposal as well to make background checks better. Right now, if someone applies for a gun and a background check is not completed within 3 days, they are authorized to purchase that gun without a background check. Unless you think that's a rare occurrence, it happened over 300,000 times in 2016 alone, which is the most recent year for which we have data. Why in God's name would someone need a weapon so quickly that they can't wait a week and a half or 2 weeks to get it for a background check to be completed? What is it about the next 3 days where they absolutely have to have a gun? Maybe it's because they want to do something they shouldn't be doing. And by the way, if a background check is not completed within those 3 days, it likely means there was a flag on the application which requires further study. So the fact that we would allow those people to get the guns, they tend to be the people we should be prohibiting from getting the guns. You are doing a disservice to the people of this state, and those that agree with you are doing a disservice to the people of this country and not moving forward on this important issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seeing no other senator wishing to speak, the question is on the overruling of the chair. All those in favor of overruling the chair, please signify by saying aye.
Mr. President, on this important issue, I think people deserve to know where everyone stands, so I call for a show of hands.
A show of hands has been requested. All those in favor of overruling the chair, please signify, or please raise your hand. The ruling of the chair stands. I'm sorry, announce the results.
Ayes 29.
The ruling of the chair stands. The secretary will read. Last section only.
Section 5, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, Flanagan, Klein, Stewart, Cousins, Young. Ayes 59.
Bill is passed. Senator DeFrancisco.
Can we now take up calendar number 17 by Senator Croce?
Secretary.